Have you ever just stared at a grade on a paper or a score on a test and thought, what does this number really mean? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the hidden science that turns a simple score into a real measure of skill. It's a process that affects all of us, so let's dive right in.
Okay, let's start with something I think we've all felt. You get an essay back from your teacher, and right at the top, in red ink, a B-. So, is that good? Is it bad? Are you supposed to be relieved or worried? That one little grade carries so much weight, but what it's actually telling you isn't always crystal clear.
Yeah, that B can feel like a total mixed message. Does it mean you've got a solid handle on things? Or does it mean you're just scraping by, and there are some big mistakes in there? You know, for tricky skills like writing or speaking, where it's not just right or wrong, a grade without a clear definition is, honestly, just kind of ambiguous.
And this really gets to the heart of the challenge here. At the end of the day, a score is just a number. The real work, the tricky part, is figuring out how to connect that number to what a person can actually do. It's about how you draw a meaningful line in the sand.
Think about it. Unlike a multiple-choice quiz where you're either right or you're wrong, things like speaking and writing exist on this long, continuous spectrum. There's a huge space between a really weak performance and a really strong one, with all these little shades of gray in between. This is where scoring gets super complex, and it's exactly why we need a system.
So how do we solve this puzzle? Well, lucky for us, there's actually a formal process designed to bring some order to this chaos, and it has a name: standard setting.
Standard setting is essentially the methodical way we establish those all-important cut scores. You know, these are the lines that separate a pass from a fail, or, say, an intermediate speaker from an advanced one. This process is what gives a test score its actual power and its meaning.
Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand that standard setting is not the same thing as grading on a curve. A curve, which is what we call norm-referenced, just tells you how you did compared to everybody else in the room. A standard referenced score, which is what we're talking about, measures you against a fixed, concrete description of an ability. The goalpost doesn't move, no matter who else is taking the test with you.
So how does this actually play out in the real world? How do experts decide exactly where that line should be? Well, let's open up the toolkit and look at some of the really clever methods they use.
First thing to know, this is not something a computer algorithm just spits out. The entire process hinges on the careful, considered judgment of real human beings, usually experienced teachers and assessors who've spent their careers evaluating these skills. But it's not just their gut feeling. Their expertise is channeled through very specific, structured methods.
Okay, one of the most brilliant tools is the bookmark method. It's perfect for things like essays. Just picture a huge stack of student papers, all physically sorted from the absolute weakest to the strongest. The expert judges then literally walk through the stack and place a bookmark right at the spot where they think the performance crosses a line, say from a fail to a pass. And what's wild is that this simple, kind of low-tech approach is incredibly reliable and accurate.
All right, another powerful tool takes a totally different tack. This one's called the borderline method, and it zeroes in on the absolute trickiest cases, those performances that are right on the fuzzy edge of passing. Instead of looking at the obvious passes or the clear fails, it focuses all its attention on that gray area right in the middle.
You see this a lot in speaking tests. Raters are specifically trained to identify and flag any test taker whose performance feels borderline. The average score of just those people then becomes a super important piece of data that helps determine where the official passing line should be. It's a really smart way to define the line by studying the people who are standing right on it.
So as you can see, this whole process is built on human expertise. And that, of course, means we have to talk about the human element, with all its incredible strengths and all its potential challenges.
I mean, let's be real. No two experts are exactly the same. One judge might be a little tougher, another a little more lenient. On top of that, a student's performance isn't set in stone. You can have a good day or a bad day. And in something like a speaking test, your score can actually be influenced by who your partner is. These are the real-world, messy details that any good system has to deal with. And really, it all boils down to this one simple truth. The fairness, the reliability, and the ultimate validity of a test standard rests squarely on the quality of those expert judges. The whole system is on their shoulders. So, how do you build that quality and guard against all that messiness? Well, it's a three-step process. First, you have to carefully select highly qualified judges. Then, you put them through intensive training on the exact scoring rules. And finally, and this part is key, they calibrate. They all get in a room and discuss their ratings, argue their points, and align their judgments until they have a shared, consistent understanding of the standard.
All right, so we've been deep in the mechanics of all this, but let's zoom out. Because this is not just some abstract academic exercise. The lines that these experts draw have huge, real-world consequences for all of us.
Think about it. That CUT score is what determines who gets their license to be a doctor or a pilot. It's what decides who gets into their dream university program or who gets that big promotion at work. We're talking about high-stakes decisions that literally shape people's lives, and they all come down to having a fair and defensible standard.
And because the stakes are so high, the entire process has to be built on a bedrock of ethical principles. It's got to be transparent so everyone can see how the decisions are made. It has to be fair, applied the same way to every single person. And it has to be justifiable, based on solid evidence, not on someone's whim or, political pressure.
So, we'll leave you with a final thought to chew on. We've seen the incredible human expertise that goes into setting a fair standard. Now, as technology charges forward, with AI starting to score our essays and evaluate our skills, the really big question becomes, how do we carry these essential human principles of fairness, transparency, and justification into that future? How do we make sure every score is, and always will be, truly meaningful for everyone?